Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker, and in today's video I am continuing my series of looking back at some past NBA draft class grades over on Bleacher Report, and today is going to be the 2011 class. And I've skimmed through these a little bit before I did this video. There are some crazy takes and grades for this class. But really quickly before we get started, if you enjoy the NBA, then consider subscribing. I upload every single day. Okay, here we go. This is a class that I have covered a good amount on this channel. I've talked about them as potentially the weirdest draft class ever. You've got Kawhi at 15, you've got Jimmy Butler at 30, you've got Isaiah Thomas at 60, and a lot of really good players in this class, and not all of them coming within the top 10. But we begin here at number 1 overall with Kyrie Irving receiving a grade of a B. And there was a legitimate conversation at the time of this draft whether it should be Kyrie Irving or Derrick Williams at the top of this draft. The Cavaliers needed some kind of direction, and Kyrie seemed like the more talented player, but he only played 11 games in college, and Williams was a front court player that maybe provided a little bit more versatility. And in this grade, you can see, giving them a B, it says Kyrie may end up being a solid NBA point guard, but Derrick Williams has more talent and would have been a better fit for the team. And obviously Kyrie went on to become one of the best scoring guards in the league, winning a championship with the Cavaliers, and Derrick Williams has just been like a fringe rotation guy for his entire career. But you can see there was a legitimate conversation here. As you can see, number 2 overall, Derrick Williams receiving a grade of an A-. And it just never worked out for him. He never was able to shoot the ball well enough from the perimeter, was never a good enough on-ball offensive player to justify being this high of a pick in this class, as you'll see some of the other really good players coming up later on. Not that he was a truly awful player, just kind of a fringe rotation guy, which is certainly not what you want out of the number 2 overall pick. And then we get to number 3, a player that was a bit of a wild card, Enes Kanter, going to the Utah Jazz. And if I'm remembering this correctly, I believe Kanter was supposed to go to Kentucky and either didn't play or played very little because of some recruiting violation issues as an international prospect. They gave this a grade of a B+, and Enes Kanter has turned into a really nice player. Never an all-star at any point, and has been maybe even a bench guy at some stops as a 6th man, but still a really good big. Not going to be very good defensively, but one of the best rebounders, especially on the offensive end in the entire league, with a couple of post moves to his game as well. Nice career for him. Not a bad pick at all, number 3 overall. Obviously, there's much better players later on, but still not an awful pick there at number 3. Next up now is probably the most controversial pick at the time, at the top of this draft, number 4 overall, the Cleveland Cavaliers having 2 top picks in this class. I believe it was because they took on the contract of Baron Davis from the Clippers, which I think was actually the first pick, and then the 4th pick was their own. Tristan Thompson going number 4 overall was a big surprise for a lot of people. Good athlete, could rebound the ball, could get up and down the floor, still a very young player, someone that they hope could develop alongside Kyrie Irving, and ended up having a nice career. Good defender, was a key part of that championship winning team there for Cleveland. But at the time, as you can see, with a grade of a D-, people did not like this pick at all. They thought there was much better value on the board. The Cavaliers clearly wanted to get a big guy, and Tristan Thompson was their big guy of choice. This is definitely a better grade now, looking back, than a D-. Not a pick, though, that a lot of people liked at all at the time for the Cavaliers. Next up now, the Toronto Raptors selecting Jonas Valanciunas at number 5 overall. It says Valanciunas has been hyped up as possibly the best center in this year's class, and in a league devoid of talent at that position, he could end up being a good pick in a few years. He was seen as kind of a boom or bust player, ended up developing into a pretty nice solid player, and then as part of a trade package for Marc Gasol, ended up in Memphis, and is just a good big. He's not going to be an all-star caliber player, but he's also not going to be a bench guy, just a good, solid starting big guy that can score some of the paint. Has expanded his range a little bit lately as well. A nice player there at number 5 overall. This, however, is probably, I mean, as much of a miss as Derrick Williams at number 2 overall is, this is by far the biggest miss of this class. Number 6 overall, the Wizards selecting Vesely, who I don't have the numbers in front of me, but barely played in the NBA, was a complete non-factor, and this is like an F- times 7 at number 6 overall for a guy that just gave zero value to the Washington Wizards. Was supposed to provide, this versatile front court scoring, shooting presence that's also a good athlete at 6'11". Gave him A- grade here. Let me just read the evaluation. It says, I'm not sold on Vesely, but I have to give Washington credit for getting the guy they wanted, who most certainly fits a need for the team. Some feel he's the most athletic big man in this year's class. He and John Wall could be an exciting combo if that's true. That wasn't the case at all. He never really made much of an impact for this team. Again, an F- if there ever was one at number 6 overall. Next up now, number 7. There's a lot of trading going on now from this point on, but this pick was made by the Bobcats, and it was Bismack Biyombo, and they gave this grade or they gave this pick, excuse me, a grade of a C. Biyombo was an athletic, defensive-minded big man that was still extremely young, as you can see, at 18 years old, and the word upside was attached to him a ton because of that youth and that athleticism, and he just never really developed beyond what he is now, and that is just a guy that has athleticism, brings energy and effort, but just isn't a very good offensive player, doesn't have great hands in the paint to catch passes and finish them, but is at least a usable big. It says Charlotte really needs scoring after trading Gerald Wallace last year and Steven Jackson yesterday. Biyombo might be the worst offensive player in the first round. However, he could be a beast on defense in a few years. Never became a beast on defense. Got a couple of nice contracts because of some nice performances in Toronto and elsewhere. But, you know, an okay pick at number 7 overall, but nothing great. Number 8 now, another guy that you could argue is a bust. There's a lot of those in this part of the draft. And it's Brandon Knight going to the Detroit Pistons, receiving an A grade here. And he bounced around to a couple of teams, had one really, really good year in Phoenix, and then just hasn't been able to stay healthy. Like, that's been his only issue. I honestly believe that Brandon Knight would have been a really talented NBA player, a borderline all-star type scoring guard, and just wasn't able to stay healthy for whatever reason. It says the Pistons have needs all over the roster, and starting rebuilding efforts with point guards is all the rage these days. And just look at the last 3 point guards that John Calipari sent to the league. Derrick Rose, Tyreke Evans, and John Wall. That's a good point. And I think that he could have been like a Tyreke Evans type player, a bit more of a scorer than a playmaker. And it just never worked out because of the injury issues. Number 9 overall now, Kemba Walker going to the Charlotte Bobcats. He got he got a B+ grade here. This has to be an A to an A+ grade for me personally. When you're getting a guy that made an All-NBA team for Charlotte, one of the better scorers in this class, one of the better guards in this class, and became a nice player for Charlotte. They were never able to surround him with enough for it to really matter in terms of team success in the regular season or the postseason in Charlotte, but still a nice pick here at number 9 overall, and certainly should be graded more favorably than a B+ now here in 2020. Next up now, one of the most polarizing players in this entire class, number 10 overall, Jimmer Fredette, getting a C+ grade going to the Sacramento Kings. Says Jimmer may be the most underrated player in this year's draft class, but the pick represents an awful fit for both the team and the player. Sacramento would have been much better off going with Kawhi Leonard or one of the other small forwards who were available. They certainly would have been much better off. Jimmer Fredette was an outstanding shooter in college and, like I said, an exciting and a polarizing player. And it just never worked out for him in the NBA. And maybe starting off in Sacramento wasn't the best, case scenario for him. And maybe he would have succeeded elsewhere. I don't know. But the athleticism just wasn't there. The defensive ability just wasn't there. And the shooting, although it was good, was never as great as it maybe you thought it would have been when he was coming out of college. And ultimately that was his downfall, is just having that one big translatable skill and it not really translating as much as he needed it to really stick around in the league. So a C+ grade, this is probably more like a C, I guess, somewhere around there, maybe a C-. Next up now, a big one, number 11, the Golden State Warriors selecting Klay Thompson. And I want to read this selection here as they gave this a grade of a C. It says, Klay Thompson saw his draft stock skyrocket over the last couple of weeks, and I think Golden State may have fallen into a trap here. They have a wealth of wings and guards and would have been better off reaching for a big here. That's true. At the time, they definitely needed a big guy. I believe when they drafted Klay Thompson, they were still looking for that Andrew Bogut type guy. They were going to trade Monte Ellis later on for Andrew Bogut. I could be getting that timeline incorrect, but they ended up drafting one of the greatest shooters of all time in this spot, and the backbone of what ended up being multiple championship winning teams down the road with him and Steph and Draymond. And for him to get a C grade here is pretty incredible. It took a few years for him to fully develop into what he is now, and as I said, it's just a perfect fit for that team. And even then, the Warriors almost traded him away for Kevin Love before they started winning championships. So lots and lots of what ifs here with the Warriors if they never drafted Klay Thompson, because it didn't seem like a pick a lot of people were excited about, or potentially trading him away for Kevin Love. But definitely an A+++ pick there at number 11. Next up now, number 12 overall, Alec Burks, a player that I still haven't given up on. Like, I continually try and give chances to him, because whenever he's healthy, he has the athleticism to get to the rim. He has some on-ball scoring skills, and he can be a good defender with that length and that athleticism. Just hasn't been healthy enough for long enough to really get into a good rhythm. They gave this a grade of a B. Still kind of an incomplete for me, but I guess you could give it more like a C at this point in time. Number 13, you're getting number 13 and 14, you're getting the Morris brothers. I want to skip ahead though to Kawhi Leonard. Number 15 overall, giving this an A grade. Obviously, it's an A plus times 1,000 for Kawhi. And it says this is an extremely good pickup for the Spurs at number 15. They desperately needed a small forward since Richard Jefferson obviously hasn't panned out. Greg Popovich will get the most out of Leonard, whose athleticism, hustle, defense, and rebounding will be fantastic for San Antonio. And this pick and this trade where they sent George Hill to the Indiana Pacers was what allowed this team to bridge the gap between the previous era and the future era of the San Antonio Spurs and win more championships than they ever would have had they not selected Kawhi Leonard here. Became a Finals MVP, is now one of the best players in the entire league, and obviously the situation in San Antonio didn't end the way that they would have hoped that it would, but this was one of the most impactful picks of the last decade or so, and absolutely an A++ grade looking back on it now. Number 16 overall now for the Philadelphia 76ers, Nikola Vukovich, who I honestly did not know was ever drafted by the Sixers. It says, excellent pick for the Sixers here. They have a talented young core with Drew Holiday, Evan Turner, and Thaddeus Young, but they needed a legitimate center to go along with them. He gets an A grade here. That's pretty accurate. Guy that made an all-star team last year. Nice big there for Orlando. But I'm going to skip over some guys here. I mean, Amon Shumpert, Chris Singleton, Tobias Harris getting a C+ grade. That would obviously be better now. I want to skip, though, to see what they have to say about Jimmy Butler at number 30 overall. So Jimmy Butler's 21 years old, number 30, picked by the Chicago Bulls, gets a C+ grade. And it says, well, the Bulls officially didn't take a shooting guard in the first round. Odd. I think Butler might be a solid player, though. They list him as a small forward. Also, I don't think there's any way Jimmy Butler's 6'8". But anyway, he's definitely a 2 and sometimes a 3 as well. Turned into a really good player. This is an A+ times 1,000 again. For the Bulls to get a player of this caliber, someone that really helped them while he was there and obviously had some issues, moved on to a couple different teams. And you can say what you want about the personality issues and the chemistry issues with Jimmy Butler. He's a really good NBA player and certainly an incredible value for number 30 overall. And I don't think that they're going to grade anything beyond. Oh, they are. They're going to just give quick grades the rest of the way because I want to get to number 60 overall, Isaiah Thomas. There it is. So number 60, Isaiah Thomas. I think Jimmy Fredette is grossly underrated, but he doesn't fit well with the Kings' other players. Isaiah Thomas, on the other hand, does. Don't be surprised if he ends up being the best final draft pick in NBA history. You know that you like it. I don't know who the rest of the final draft picks ever are, but that's honestly a pretty incredible statement because you might be right. Getting a B here, this is an A+, grade here, absolutely. For the Kings, although Isaiah Thomas didn't have his best years with the Kings, he ended up having his best years with the Celtics, becoming a second-team All-NBA caliber guy at number 60 overall. That's a pretty good statement to say that he was the best final pick in NBA history. And yeah, there you go. That is the 2011 NBA draft. As I said, some pretty crazy takes in here. When you're looking at Kyrie getting a B grade, when you're looking at Klay Thompson getting a C, some other guys like Jan Vesely getting an A-. Pretty incredible looking back now at some of these grades and seeing how these guys have developed now over the years. But yeah, that's going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.